So yeah, it'll depend on how long it takes me to get through the lecture, but there is this list of interactive examples, and I've just assigned it for like covering on your own, because we might not have time to cover everything. But there's different topics, and I just threw in a couple or one or two or whatever different examples for these different types of interactions. They all are different ways of working, but they all do have different conceptual pathways, I guess. So hopefully those will help you think towards project. Also, I should have told the other class too, but it's in the recording, I guess. Underneath of our, I think it's only underneath the teaching page. Not teaching, DMS page. The coding with donuts. So this is like projects from past students from last semester that participated in like the competition. So you can check out those for examples as far as student stuff. I don't know if I added them here. I don't think I did anyway. I passed, what the heck just happened? Past student projects. No. So the coding with donuts kind of serves as that. I guess I could probably link that as well. So only update I tweak on the schedule today is I don't need you to necessarily read the chapters 3 and 4 for this book that I gave you until next week. So just make sure you've gotten through the beginning if you have not already. And this will give you time to get your essays done, hopefully get your proposals done, and I'm going to be hoping you guys also hop back into P5 over the weekend at least once to doodle a little bit, kind of keep fresh. So yeah, that's what we're doing today. Start off with this lecture. This will take me like 40 minutes or something. Maybe, I don't know, maybe shorter. So I'll be going back and forth a little bit here. Getting you guys situated. Covering different terms and such. So what is generative art? Broke this down into, I didn't break this down. Broken down into kind of 2 subcategories. And it's really anything that's made through use of a system. And I mean, we're going to be doing obviously computerized generative art, but really any autonomous system. So this breaks down into these 2 categories of interactivity or algorithmic. So you totally, if you really thought about it, if you're really interested in pursuing an algorithmic type of piece, you could talk to me. We could probably make that work. Otherwise, everybody else is going to be working towards an interactive piece. But I do have some examples of like algorithmic to show. For context, it's like thinking about having data coming in either from an outside source that's evolving something, or it's a system that's just based on algorithms, right? That's just completely looping itself continually. So like a painting could be like a screensaver, you know, algorithmic art. So interactive art can differ from generative art based on the system, based on the ability to be interacting. Pretty self-explanatory, right? This notion, though, of like interactive art is everywhere today, right? Like everybody, the way I situated to the other class is like, if we were all to take how much time we're on our phones, right? Like get that feedback. How much time are we all each on our phone for the whole week on average? And then we all added those up and we got an average. It's probably looking like at least over 2 hours a day, right? During COVID times, maybe like 7 hours a day. Maybe not that much, but a lot of us are pushing it sometimes, you know? And if you think about it, every single thing you do has gone through multiple series of interface design components. Every app, everything you interact with on those apps, somebody has gone through meticulously and decided how that's going to work. And you can go to different places or download really shitty apps, and you can realize, wow, yeah, they need more people reviewing this because it's just not very good, right? So there's a whole career path along with interface design, often called UX design. So, you know, if you're interested in this notion of just like creating systems or making things easier, more accessible, right? Accessibility is a big thing these days, you know, like Apple tries to do that quite a bit within their different software. I had the privilege one time of helping a blind customer at the Apple store with his phone. And he had the feature of like tapping features in that every iPhone has. It's a feature, accessibility feature that allows you to navigate through the phone with certain taps, and it starts to play back options audibly. And watched him navigate through the whole phone without seeing anything that he's doing. And a lot of times, you know, you have to listen to what the phone is saying to have the options to then where to tap. But he would already have all of those memorized. So he's not even really listening. He's just tapping on various parts of the screen. It's all interaction design, interface design. So there's a lot of careers to really pursue these days within that realm. So this project really is kind of getting you situated in that. Then this is just a generalized, I don't know how accurate it is, visualization of different inputs, right, that we can experience. And this notion that like, yeah, we could read something or listen to something and maybe we can like, maybe we'll remember them differently, right? Like everybody's a little different. But as soon as you start pairing these different modalities up, these different types of inputs up into a more cohesive structure, we're more likely to remember it. So like you can go out online and find a random article and read it. And like, yeah, you're gonna remember some stuff. Depends on how interested you are. Yeah, you could go out and do some coding and play around. Might remember it. Depends on how interested you are. Or you do a class like this where you're hearing things, you're seeing things, you're reading things, right? You're actually going out and doing the things while everybody takes classes, right? Because you have this enhanced experience by pairing these different things together. It's like the human condition. So that's really this notion that we start to tap into for this project is this extended ability to connect with the user now, not just like a passive person. And this is kind of an evolution that we've done in the class. So started with these, like this first drawing project, kind of getting your feet wet, playing around, trying to just make something interesting to look at, right? Maybe embedding some meaning. Then getting into a project where you're also just reading as a passive viewer, but we have the ability to literally read through and gain more meaning or insight or, right, some feeling from that. And then this audio project, as I've talked to a lot of you in kind of like these consultations, really starting to think about audio as a completely different medium in the sense that you have these two ears, these two channels, and through that experience of having those two channels at the same time, you're able to create a sense of spatial awareness, right? And through that notion of creating that spatial awareness, you almost can start to activate the listener, even though it's something that they're listening from like start to finish over time. You're giving that listener like a little bit more of an active role potentially if you use stereo in a more advanced way, right? So it's like incrementally starting to think through different ways of enhancing or evolving viewership or retention through these different forms of creating. We're kind of taking like a few lunges forward with this project and compiling a bunch of stuff together. And it really becomes a lot less about you creating something as it is like the experience that the user is then, you're allowing the user to experience, right? And this is a very often overlooked kind of thing for this sort of project, but it's really where your head should be at as you're doing this stuff. You're not just making for, you know, for a grade. You're not just making for a portfolio piece. You're also making this for other people to have an experience. And what are you delivering to them? What are they getting out of this? This is kind of similar bits like you would have with the other projects, but the ability for you to really offer them that takeaway is heightened because of this blend of modalities, right? So you could do something funny, right? You could do something that's completely off the walls, like some horrific thing, right? You could be challenging what's acceptable. You could be, you know, there's a lot of different approaches. We're going to cover some different things, but it's really thinking about that user experience and communicating. And we are going to be using primarily the mouse and keyboard, right? Especially being at home. Some of you might not even have a mouse. Maybe it's just a trackpad. But there is the ability to use webcams. There is the ability of adding any other hardware, you know, input into this thing. Just depends on the amount of time you're willing to take to explore the different options. The mouse and keyboard stuff is very simple to integrate. Whereas some of the other stuff is also pretty easy because the code's already kind of pre-written for you. You can just copy things. But for all of you newbies, mouse, keyboard. But yeah, microphone, you know, also like just even using other media, like found media, like bringing in audio and being able to analyze different aspects of that audio, like the different frequencies, and maybe using those frequencies to get data. And then what are you using that data for? Oh, maybe I'm gonna use that data to change this shape over here, right? So I think that's something I'm gonna bring up here in a moment. I don't know where I throw that in. I guess anywhere really. Oh, here we go. It is the next page. I was looking at my notes. So we could be thinking about multimedia as well, right? So bring in images, bring in text, using text, doing your own live drawings of sorts. Video and sound is what I was just mentioning before. And this notion right here of things on the computer really being ones and zeros, everything on the computer, right? Just this notion of digital itself, right? So just because we bring an image in and we get to look at the image doesn't mean that we can't use that image in a different way and kind of deconstruct it, run it through some filter process where we output like data that could be unique to that image, and we could use that data for something in particular. So like an example could be if you're doing live video, right? Live video has continual amounts of frames happening. If you had a tracking of like the white balance, there's very simple things like this that you can incorporate. Like, oh, how much white do you have in your image, right? Like, oh, there's white there on one side and there's darkness. I'm trying to get a good example there, right? So maybe there would be some program that we can implement that would highlight where on the screen the most amount of white is, which would probably be like the top center, right? We could use that as a tracking system instead of your cursor. That's live camera feed, but who's to say you can't do that with a video or use audio and analyze that? And anytime you hear like a bass drop, maybe that we use that as a trigger to flash a color on the screen, right? So it's really thinking through the different ways you can be utilizing data. And for those of you who are interested in grad school, it's a really easy example by throwing out grad school, because a lot of you probably are somewhat thinking about that or like have thought about it in terms of like, oh, is there an advanced career that I want to pursue? What's that particular niche that I want or I'm interested in? You know, biggest advice is thinking through this notion that grad school is really going to be very specific on research almost anywhere you go. So even in the arts, like I went to grad school for art, right? It wasn't about just me going in a room and making some stuff and like putting in a gallery. Oh, cool. Same thing for you guys if you do like media. It's going to be like, why are you doing this? For what reasons? You know, what's the outcome? What are your connections? There's a lot of theory that needs to be happening behind the scenes. And just because that is a requirement in grad school doesn't mean that you guys can't be using that now, really, right? It's really like an enhancement of your production to take other ideas and utilize them. So I threw in here McLuhan, just like a quote, just because the section is really relating to this quote, that McLuhan's prevalent thinkers of the century, this last century, and like media, thinking about media. And he brought forth this notion that extensions, or all media is extensions of man, meaning like, you know, this cell phone right here, it's something that we made, but it's part of me now, right? Oh, these pants I have on, it's nothing related to humans, but I incorporated them. It's part of my identity, right? It's part of how I live the life, my life. Any kind of media is part of man. It's just this interesting concept that you really don't think through till you think it through, right? So I bring this up in the sense that you could quite literally go out and find something that interests you in terms of a form of theory and do an entire project with that in mind. That's your core component of the project. Everything else relating to it is just like a means to the end, right? I've tried to train you guys through the semester like similar to this approach, right? Come up with the concept. Okay, now you have this concept, you have this idea. How are you building that idea out? But I bring this notion up here because realistically, as you go on, and if you were to continue making within this realm of multimedia interaction, right, you have the ability of plugging anything into the computer that you want, right? It doesn't need to be a mouse and keyboard. It could be anything. So, yeah, just trying to give you guys some extra food for thought, perhaps. I don't have lots of images in this, right? This isn't a super happy, fun-go-lucky presentation. It's like kind of getting you situated in thought a little bit more, maybe, than we have been in the previous projects. So a couple other follow-up things here, kind of thinking about an approach to starting projects. Kind of give you guys some structural basis for these notions. And I guess this would be a good little segue to open up the vocab here. So even though I'm not quizzing you guys, I still really am expecting you guys to at least open it and look over things once. Especially if you're new to code, there's different things in here that'll help you out. Under like page 2, some of the stuff is, so this is like coding related. We're going to be getting into that next week. But in terms of like thinking through project concepts, this last page of practice goes over different terms that can get you starting to think about different ways that you might be harnessing content together. So like using repetition, unity and harmony, and that's kind of what this is going over here. In 8 minutes, we'll be able to continue this presentation. Oh, I already scrubbed past it. Nice. So just like in terms of structuring stuff out, you could be thinking of a project in terms of page-based, right? I like to refer to that as scenes. So all the examples we'll be going through will use this context of scenes. And time-based. So things arranged in time. And that could be abstract. It could be straightforward. Linear versus non-linear, right? Kind of in order or not in order. These are basic concepts. But then as we apply these different things, I think I have a couple examples here. Why are we not moving forward? There we go. So basic book. What is a basic book? Well, clearly it's page-based, right? And it is linear. The only reason it wouldn't be linear is if it's like a, you know, adventure, choose your own adventure book where you go to a different page or something, right? Google, the web, also clearly page-based, but now we're non-linear. We can go wherever the hell we want, whenever we want. America. Time-based and clearly linear. I'm curious if there's like, I guess choose your own adventure for a movie would be like a game, right? Okay. Yeah. Wouldn't really be a movie anymore, I guess. I don't know. And finally, random interaction doodling. Completely time-based, because you have to do it over time. Completely up to your discretion, right? So just different things you could be thinking about as an interface components. Like how does the user make their gestures? Is it just a simple point and click? Is it a drag? Is it a scribble, right? So the thing that I may not have really brought up yet is this notion that you're not only, is this, maybe I'm thinking it's one more slide away. Yeah, it's coming up. Skipping that. So why are we making this art? Well, you know, coding is a big deal these days. It's a great thing to know. Pretty much helps any job if you know how to do some kind of coding. So it's just really a different perspective, different way. A lot of times you get these unexpected moments. Clearly you can get that anywhere, but it seems to be more intriguing when you're able to stumble on it in your own time, right? Like a book, you're going to stumble on something unexpected because you have to. Whereas here, you might not stumble on something, right? Like, what is this notion of an Easter egg? Are we supposed to find an Easter egg? And then this notion of being unique to a specific computer hardware. This could relate to a lot of things. The big example I just give, because I've used it myself, is if you were to use a screen in some work, right? You have this room, you have a screen. It doesn't even matter what else is there. You have something going on the screen. It doesn't really matter if it's context. You could have an old tube TV CRT screen, or you could have a flat screen. Depending on what you use, like like what type of hardware you're using, it's going to also enhance and change, evolve, or suggest a different meaning. So this class, we're all designing on a computer. We all have the same setup, the same system. But as you keep going, it's really acknowledging that that's not your limitation. That's just because we have it readily available, right? And you guys are all in that really amazing situation where you're in this department that you have access to like tons and tons and tons of hardware. There's actually, for those of you who are interested in like old school tech, there's a lot of it sitting around the department like that hasn't been used in a long time. You just need to go out and ask around for it. Do projects on that stuff, right? And it's kind of up to you. A lot of people don't really offer it up. I would love a class where I could offer it up. Go ahead and ask for that class. Continuing. Why create interactive art? Blah, 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 blah. Inappropriate. This is stuff like, you know, you need interaction. So like, how do you teach a kid how a cyclone works without having them read something or watch a video on something and for them to learn it? How do you do that? Like, nobody there to tell them what to do. How do they learn what a cyclone is? Well, if you take away reading, right, you take away verbal, the only things that you're really left with are like smell, touch, right? So it kind of brings you into this notion of things that you might find in a science museum, right? Like hands-on learning. That is an interactive process. So if there's not something out there that has been developed for a specific purpose, that's where you come in and design something for that purpose. And then could give you that deeper understanding. So, you know, depending on the situation, just like teaching a kid how a cyclone works, you know, like tornado, they might not understand it if you just tell them. If you watch they watch a video, they might not understand it. But if they can move something in real time and feel it, right? Probably going to be able to understand it better. So that kind of puts you in this unique situation. If you're thinking about kind of being interested in these different fields, like, are you interested in being creative? Are you interested in making something to get a passing grade to go on and continue doing other content? Are you interested in user interface design and you want to get a job in that? You know, what are your interests long term? Because this project is often a pretty good pinnacle project to be showing in our portfolio. And depending on what type of portfolio need you have, right? Like, what do you want to convey? Do you want to convey that you can put some code in and copy some code? And like, yeah, I copied this code, I made this thing work. Or do you want to show that, oh, I created this abstract experience where you can go through and discover things? Or, you know, I created this documentary type learning experience for people to understand disabilities better and be more knowledgeable toward people with disabilities. Or, right? So like, the concept is really what you should be thinking about at this stage. And once you grasp onto that concept, we can start talking about how to build that out. I won't just be defaulting to a simple like, oh, I want to just make a game. I want to shoot some stuff. Games are actually pretty challenging to do if you have not coded before. Like, if you haven't taken DMS121 or you're not a computer science major, then you probably should be sticking with more basic things. Some light coding for a light gaming kind of thing is probably going to be pretty fine. But getting into stuff that's more complex, it's not going to happen this quick. It takes time. So I think there's one other example I was going to say. I lost my train of thought. It was in line with this notion of, you know, are you creating something unique and new? Or I already talked about like a documentary type thing, or an abstract experience. Abstract can be a lot of different things, right? It could be like kind of like a game, kind of be like riddles. Could be like abstract and you're drawing different things, or random events, right? Like Easter eggs are popping up. You're hacking audio. But so like the approach you take, and if you were to use this as a portfolio piece, like it kind of stands for like whatever you end up making, whatever that theme is, it helps stand for like what type of creative mind are you? You know, what ways do you think? So I'd really urge you guys to kind of mull over these different notions that I've been talking about and look over the vocab terms and be thinking like, not only what the project comes off as, but also, this is the part I think I was skipping on. There you go. Also, really thinking about user experience. And actually, that's this last one that I didn't tap on. Is like internal, external reflection, this human condition. And I want to extrapolate this a little bit because this is another category of like research that's really well paired with this content. I actually did a fair amount of study on phenomenology throughout my years in school. Nothing too in depth, kind of like understanding it to an extent that brings up questions, right, and concepts like, oh, yeah, I want to create something like this because of this, right? So you could do a whole project conceptually. And this notion of phenomenology is like phenomenology is the study of phenomenon. It's the study of yourself in relation to your external periphery, right? Everything that's happening, this TV back here, that's there. It's in context to my body. So that there's some kind of meaning in relation from my body to that television. No matter what's happening around me, it's like that's one level. But then also, what happens when you introduce another person in this space here with me now? That person has a connection with me. That person has a connection to that TV. That connection with that TV changes to them based on me being here, right? So if you had a computer, if you had a blank room, it's all darkness. In the middle of the room, you have a computer set up with a chair, and it's a mouse, keyboard, monitor, right? And you told somebody to go in and sit down and experience this artwork. Or not even say sit down, just go experience this art in this room. Come back out when you're done, right? We're probably going to go in and sit down and grab the mouse, right? Because these are all ways in which people are ingrained to experience a system. And that's in a sense kind of the study of phenomenology. How are you interacting with the environment? But also, then if you think about, if you send two people into that room with that one computer in darkness, and you said, both of you go in and experience this artwork and come back when you're done, probably one person's going to sit down and experience it. They're not going to try to do it at the same time, right? There's going to be a common dialogue happening between the two people, trying to make sense of the situation. They're going to be talking about the experience as it's evolving. They might switch roles, but at that point, if it's the same work over and over, are they going to experience it the same way? They've already seen it. There's going to be a common relationship between them, and then between them with the computer. They're going to experience that work differently because there's another person there. That's a very real component, right? So if you're going to make this project right now for this class, and then all of a sudden I say next year, oh, hey, let's put your project in the middle of the CFA atrium, and we're gonna have a dance party, and your project's gonna be the middle of this dance party for everybody. It's probably not going to be too effective, right? Because it's only really meant for one person. So that's another reason I bring this up, is like, you're making this thing for who and to what end, right? You have the ability of kind of probing at different possibilities here. And this is something to take with you further too. It's not just right now, but it's just trying to think about thinking a little bit more in depth. So I urge you guys to kind of maybe even spend a little bit of time this weekend picking up a new research piece, you know, like do a library search for something you're interested in and print it out and read it. Maybe that'll help you with your project concept, you know? Cool. I want you guys to go to p5js.org. Let's see, can I pin myself? Pin. Shrink myself? Nice. I'm thinking I might be able to keep my video on top of everything. Not sure while I record. Maybe it won't work with full screen. I don't know. So p5js.org. This is our coding platform. We will be talking about all the different stuff kind of a little bit more in depth as we go along. Today's just diving in. We're not going to really talk about any of this crap. The reading that I assigned is really to kind of get you situated in what P5 is, where it came from, what does it matter. The general sense is that, or the general element to convey here is that this is a very easy to digest platform for learning coding, because it gives you the output visually right next to where you're coding. You get to do some little bits of coding, and then you get to see what it does or hear what it does right afterwards. So it's very, very more user-friendly for learning than, say, like HTML with CSS style sheets, and you have to go back and forth, and you have to learn this different stuff. There's a reference page that we're going to be using today. You'll see how easy it is to reference and copy things. So we're just going to click on editor. This is our quote unquote application, our web editor. This is it. This is what you'll be using for the rest of the semester. I'm going to cover the basics here so you guys have a good situation of what's going on. The first thing, though, I want you to do, I'll give you guys like few minutes is to go up to the top. There should be a sign up option. And after you click sign up, you can either make your own account profile for the P5JS site, or you could just sign in with Google. And so whichever way you prefer, you'll just want to keep doing that each time. But I'll let you guys a couple minutes get that set up. Good to go? I'm going to put this down actually. All right. So we have this top menu, a couple of different things we could add in here. Right here, we can actually change the name of the sketch we're in. By default, every new sketch has just a quick name, like 2 random words. We can just change that. We'll put hour of code Right, and then in the top right, we have this little gear icon, and this is where you could change a couple of the different settings. Like right now, I have high contrast. Main reason being is that for either the light or the dark, you only get 2 colors, whereas the high contrast, you get a third. So it helps to, distinguish the visuals a little bit better, like what components are what. I have larger text size, auto save, auto close brackets. This can be annoying as you progress. So if you find that, that is bugging you, you can just turn it off. I usually like to keep it on for now, but I'll turn it off. I like to keep it on to show you guys, is what I mean. And then there's a couple other accessibility things. That's about it. There is this other option we're going to talk about next week. But in general, I just want you guys to go ahead and hit play, this play button. And this is just how you get a preview of what the code is. So by default, it just throws some stuff in here. This is kind of like the bare bones, what you need to have some kind of preview. I think we could like just play nothing. Yeah, I mean, oops. We could like remove the canvas and then it would still draw one. It's just like a defaulted value. But anyway, it's just like a gray, right? It's just this gray background. Why? Because we've told it to draw this gray background. So I know that we haven't talked about coding. We are going to talk about it more in depth next week, about the structure of coding, the different elements of code. Oh, and I do want to note here, let me turn on my chat. So if anybody has any confusion as I go along, I'm talking anything, you can't get something to work, you don't understand what I said, you have a follow-up question, yell it out on the chat or on your microphone if you feel comfortable. You could send me a private message. Any of those I won't call out. I know that as the semester has progressed, a lot of people have been being silent on things and then finding out like they should have asked more later. You shouldn't have to be relying on like watching the video through a second time when you could just ask me things now. Especially because we don't have a lot of time left in the semester. And this bit of coding is really, we're going. It's gonna be fast. So anything you guys have, throw in the chat, right? Or call out, or whatever you want to do. So just in general, and again, we're talking about this on Monday, these different functions, right? Function. This is something that is written to allude to programming language, but there's basically a new block of code. And each of these new blocks is named, and they have some stuff, right? And the stuff ends up happening between an open curly bracket and a closed curly bracket. And so these names that are here by default, setup and draw, these are functions that are already predefined in P5. So it knows what to do with setup, it knows what to do with draw. For our understanding, setup is something that happens one time, only one time, whereas draw is happening multiple times. So just to get you guys situated, because you are saving this, you have it for future reference. You could be taking notes down on paper if you want, if you like to. Otherwise, you could also take notes right here in the editor. And you just walk through with me with this. All you do is pick a spot you want to type something and type 2 slashes. That's all you need to do to tell the program, hey, everything after this is going to be just a note. Don't use it as actual code, right? So everything in the setup happens one time, right? So executes things once. Whereas this draw executes all lines from top to bottom on an endless loop. That is what draw is doing. Everything inside of these brackets, it'll be doing endlessly. Right now, it's just doing a background. Just for the hell of it, I'm going to put the create canvas in the draw, see what happens. It doesn't do anything. I was hoping I'd get an error or something. Oh, the last thing I forgot to call out was the console, this bottom chunk here. This is for using to identify and help troubleshoot any problems that arise. So, you know, say like, oh, you forgot to put a closed parenthesis here or something, and you went to play. I mean, number one, a lot of times it'll underline errors in red automatically anyway, right? But then if you try to run it, a lot of times it'll also just tell you what's going on and where. So this isn't always the case, and we'll talk about another way we'll have to troubleshoot later. But, you know, oh, I mistyped background because I'm an idiot. Oh, this time it's not underlined in red, but it does allude to me where it is. Line 6. Right? Oh, my cat ran on my keyboard. I didn't see it. All right, so from this point out, I think what we want to do is get a little variation going. So right now we have a plain grayish background. Let's turn it to like a dark gray. So we'll change this value that's here inside the parentheses for the value of background. We'll change that to a lower number, and we'll see that updates. Boom, right? Let's change the canvas size. So instead of 400 by 400, let's do like 600 by 400. What does that do? Oh, it's wider now. Why is it wider? The first value is the X value, right? XY. So if we're increasing the value of X, we're moving over. All right. So now I want you guys to go inside of the function draw here, and we're going to return a few lines down after background, or like before this bracket, however you want to think about making space there. And quick note about space. Space does not matter in your program, right? Only difference being like you don't want to break apart some kind of naming convention. But aside from that, like, you know, oh, I'm going to put the 25 there and the semicolon there, and I'm going to put a bunch of returns here. This is still going to play. We have this structure of a specific way of having it so that it's common, so that as we read each other's code, it's a little bit more systematically readable, you know, like we can understand it quicker. But anyhow, so a few lines down from background, inside of the draw, meaning before this, or sorry, after the curly bracket and before the ending curly bracket of draw, somewhere in between, we're just going to put in a shape, and we're going to type out RECT, which is short for rectangle, and we're going to put in parentheses here. 4 values, numerical values we need to define a rectangle. So we'll put in the first 2 could be 100 first two are the XY values. So it's going to be at 100x, and we put a comma, and then we put the Y value. So we could put 100, put a comma. We need the width and the height of the shape. So we'll put in, let's say, 100 and 100, just to make it nice and convoluted for you guys. And it always ends then with closing the parentheses and tossing in a semicolon. The semicolon isn't even necessarily needed anymore, but you should keep up with it for the sake of it. So we play that, boom, we should see that pop up. And it probably is because we have a darker background, so that's a little unfortunate. Let's do 125 as the background. So if we have a lighter background, we could see that this new rectangle has a bit of a stroke around it, this thin black stroke. And that's just by default. By default, if we put any shape, the way to think about this is, this isn't the color that it's always going to be by default. These are the values set in the program as the default values for stroke and for the fill color. If we want to change that default, update that value, we can. We'll do that here in a second.
I'm getting uncaught syntax error in line 11.
You'd have to share your screen because we all have different lines probably at this point. Zhao, did you want to share your screen?
One second. This is what I have so far.
So you have a second curly bracket on line 7 that you don't need.
Should I remove this?
Yeah, you see how you clicked right there? It highlighted the first bracket.
Right.
That's showing you that that end bracket is closing the that highlighted starting bracket, but that's not the closing bracket spot you want, right? You want it to be after the rectangle. You see how you have a bracket on line 11?
Right.
That's supposed to close draw, but right now it's not closing because you already closed it early, prematurely.
So I remove this, and then that would stand in for.
Try it.
There we go.
So now if you click next to the bracket on line 11, you see how it's highlighting the starting now?
Right.
Yep. Yeah, it's a good preview for everybody to show you like how brackets work a little bit better. Cool.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I want you guys to remove this rectangle from 100x to 0x, hit play, right? We see this, now it's on the left edge because we moved the location of that drawing that to 0. So if we do the same thing with the second value, the Y value, what's going to happen? It's going to move to the top left corner. Funny enough, the top left corner is actually our origin point. So it's a little bit confusing because it is a Cartesian grid structure, kind of like graphing calculator, right? Where you have these coordinates or these quadrants. And this is just the only quadrant we have. But what's weird is if this is the origin point, yeah, moving over to the right right? And a positive X value does move this over to the right. However, for us to move down, we would think that we need to put like a negative up. It's like the most horrendously annoying aspect that I find of this logic. I don't know why they do that. I don't know any way of subverting that. That's just what it is. You got to kind of acclimate. Beyond that, everything's awesome. So you'll learn that as you play around. You'll see how this works, and I'll show you how to implement like a cheat sheet to kind of see where you're at in the quadrants or the coordinates of your values. Okay, so next thing I want us to do is above the rectangle, let's throw in a color. We can define that by fill. And for the fill, we could do a single value, just like we did grayscale value for the background, or we could do an RGB value. How might we do an RGB value? Anybody know?
Put RGB in front of it.
Like this?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just put in 3 parameters, not RGB, but 3 values.
3 values, right? Well, how would we look? How would we know this? Like, how would we, right? Like, how do you know this thing? If we go to P5, I want you guys to all open up a second tab here. Or in my case, I'm going to do it like this, yes. Because I think if I go full screen, my little video preview disappears. I'm thinking it'd be kind of nice to have that in the recordings. So if you guys have the editor on one side and you have another tab on the right side, what you can then do is use this tab to go to the reference page. And now, if you just slowly scroll down, you can see that we have all these different types of bits of code, and all of them are linkable to the page. So if we want to say, right here, environment settings, we want fill, right? Let's click on fill. And here's a single color, right? Boom. Or here's an RGB integer values, right? So what's interesting about this editor or this reference situation is that each one of these is literally its own little P5 sketch. And you can go in here and change stuff and see the end result. You can run it. Like, yeah, I like orange. Well, you could actually also just highlight stuff and copy it, paste it. So question is, do you need to memorize all this stuff? Like literally before today, I completely wasn't even, like if I had to write the starting text that it had us do, I probably could, but like it'd be fuzzy. I'd have to think about it for a second, even though I've done it a lot. So like, yeah, you remember how to do things, or like you remember there's things you can do. You don't need to memorize exactly what the code is. Because number one, you'll have all these reference files to go and look at, and potentially, if you're nice on yourself, on your future self, you can leave yourself some notes. And then you have the reference page. So between this, the reference page and your notes and the guides we go over in class, nobody needs to go out and research on the web for additional content. In fact, if you go out and try to steal something and utilize something, it's probably going to be pretty challenging. And what ends up happening is, like, you know, so say this is your first time coding, you go out and you're gonna do a hangman game where you guess letters for a word, right? And you're gonna hang. Probably take you the majority of the rest of the class to figure out how that works, and then you'll be able to slap in like a different background or audio, get the words you're doing, and that's it. How is it any different than any other hangman? You know, is that worth putting in your portfolio? Like, oh, I copied this guide on YouTube, right? Whereas if you walk through this logic that I'm trying to get you guys to be familiarized with, in coming up with your own concept, building out your own structure, working with me to build that structure, and then using these different references to kind of help you, you know, arrive at that situation, that final result, most likely is going to be way more interesting anyway, and you're going to learn a lot more than trying to go out and tackle something that's way more complicated than you know. So yeah, so RGB values are dealing with a scale of numbers from 200 or from 0 to 255, makes 256 total colors, right? It's kind of what we talked about before, separated by a comma. That's it. Moving forward. Let's play with the stroke. So again, how do we use stroke? Well, I just look up stroke. And oh, looks like there's a no stroke. So if I don't want any stroke, but if we want to change the color of stroke, oh, looks like we just need to type stroke and 3 values. All right. So we could type it out or copy and paste it. What does that look like? All right. Oh, looks like there's a stroke weight. Let's grab that sucker. We can put that in above. Hoping you all are putting all of these things above your rectangle, by the way. And we're going to talk about why in a moment. I want a stroke weight of 23. Yeah, I'm talking about. All right. And then we're going to go ahead and introduce another shape, just for kicks, right? So how do we know what else we could do? Like, yeah, we could keep making these rectangles, I guess, right? Well, if you don't really know what you need, you can go back to reference and kind of look around. Like maybe I'll just search shape. Does that come up with stuff? Not really. If we scroll down here. Oh, convenient shape. Look at that. So on top of using this search for reference, you could also do like a command or control F on the page and search shape, right? I'm going to show you the different things that there's shape for. So we have our access to an arc or an ellipse or a circle, a line, a point, a quad. Probably better to do something a little bit more simple, like an ellipse, you know, and we can click on that and see how that's defined. And so, as I mentioned before, you can see the examples here, right? But also everything, all these references have a description that you can read through if you're not quite too sure what's going on. Like for a better example, I suppose, if I wanted to show a quad, well, how the hell do I draw that, right? There's a lot of numbers here. What do all those mean? Well, if we scroll down past the description, all of these also have a preview of the syntax, right? And then it gives you a guide for what those syntax elements would be. So first value is, they're calling x1. What is x1? The x coordinate, y coordinate, and then the x coordinate of the second point, and then the y coordinate of the second point, right? It kind of goes through and shows you all these details. So all these reference pages are kind of like your lifeblood, so you know what you're doing. Let me do this ellipse. All right, so take one of these shapes, copy it, or come in here and type it in, and let's put it below the rectangle. So we still want this to be inside of our closing bracket, but we want it to be under the rectangle. And we'll go ahead and paste it in and play. So we notice a few things here, huh? It's no longer white with a black outline. It's kind of weird, huh? It's kind of weird. So why? Well, we manually put in this info here: stroke, stroke weight, fill, and all of these are applying to the I keep blanking on this word today. Primitives, these primitive shapes, everything that's below it. Well, in fact, it's not only below it, it's everything continuing on from that point. So like literally, if I were to take all this and cut it and put it at the very bottom of draw, because this is on a loop, the first time this reads through, it's gonna draw this stuff as white. And then as soon as it hits this, it's gonna draw a continue line from there. So you might see it like flicker with a white for like a brief second, and that's it. So what it's really doing is loading this into the memory as, okay, the stroke is now X value. Stroke is now Y value, right? So if we want it to be different, what we could do is just put those same, copy those values, paste them above here, above our other shape, whatever shape you have, and then change some stuff up. Right? So stroke weight could be 4. Fill could be 275. Whoa, those are very similar. Any questions with that? So the other thing to note here is that we have two shapes now. If you have them overlapping like I do, and if you don't, it's fine. We're gonna look at it in a second. So you can see here that my ellipse is on top of the rectangle. Why? Well, we're drawing from in this order of operations. So the first thing we're doing in draw is drawing the background. And then we're drawing a rectangle. And then we're drawing an ellipse. One on top of the other, like stickers, right? It's continually putting something on top of what's already there. So what do we do from here? Oh, so one thing I'll note too is just like we're doing today, things are kind of longhand written, meaning there's a lot of code here for something very simple. This is kind of like the general process that you'll be doing for this project, for this class, if you're new to coding. Getting into stuff that would be more simplified takes time and it's more complex. So you get into that like upper level or other coding courses. We will get into some simplicity coming up with using variables, but for now it's going to be a little long. So just kind of throwing it out there that code doesn't always need to be long. Just can you understand what it's doing? That's the pro of having it longhand. So let's throw in some movement, right? Nothing's happening right now. Freaking boring. How do we get something going? Well, we could use our mouse, right? Our mouse is doing something, moving across the screen. We can see it moving. Why can't we move these things across the screen? Well, right now we're drawing them at set parameters. They're static. They're not moving. They're just one value. It's always one value. Every time it's looping, it's redrawing the same value, same value, same value, same value. We have to have it. We have to have a variable there, so it's not the same value every time. We're going to get an actual variable, like setting our own variables next week. But for today, we're going to just use mouse X and mouse Y. So mouse X, as you can see here, it's literally just thrown in as a number in defining a primitive, right? So it's this variable that the system knows, right? It actually just says that right there. The system variable. The system knows what that number is going to be. As we move our cursor, the system knows to update the value of mouse X to whatever value that cursor is at. So therefore, this is never one value unless you just let go of your mouse, right? It's continually updating as you're moving it. And because it's continually updating, if we change a value, say our, well, for mine, I'm going to change the XY values of the rectangle. I'm going to change it to mouse X for the X location, and it's being drawn at the Y location of mouse Y. And coding is case sensitive, so you'll note that this is a lowercase m. If it were to be an uppercase, it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the right color. I'd get probably an error, right? It's telling me line 11. It doesn't highlight what the error is, it's just telling me, right? So if you put it in correctly, we should see that it does in fact move. Whoa. We're getting there. We're getting there. We've got some interaction going, hopefully. Hopefully you got this going. Anybody stuck? All right. Well, chat's always here if you need it. Continuing. So we have this moving. We can still see it's underneath of this ellipse of this other shape because the rectangle comes first, the ellipse second. Question being, if this is continually drawing at the new location as I'm moving it, why am I not seeing where it was drawn before? Okay, like right here, it's drawn right there. Now I move my mouse over. Well, why don't I see it being drawn where it just was? Who has any ideas? Does anybody know?
Isn't it because at a new mouse X and mouse Y input, the code refreshes, so it redraws?
It's a good thought. It's the same answer I had from the other class. Those mouse X, mouse Y, those literally only are variable numbers. So we see them as mouse X, mouse Y, but in reality, it's numbers. So just to give you an example, you see in the console here, now that I'm printing something to the console, as I'm moving this around, this is the X value, right? As I go over across to the right, it's gaining in size. So it's just a number. We see it as a static variable here, the name mouse X, but it's really just acting as a container. That's what this notion of a variable is. It's a container. So it's a good guess, but does anybody else have a idea why? I only see one rectangle. Nobody's coded in here before? I'm surprised that I don't have the answer. That would be very hard odds. All right. So let me ask this next question then. What are we drawing? We have the stuff in function draw. What are we drawing? Steven, do you know what we're drawing? Have any ideas? Steven, are you there? You hear me? My audio's choppy? Does anybody else hear me choppy? Hello? Does anybody hear me choppy or does everybody hear me clear?
It's fine for me.
It's been choppy at some points, but it's all right now.
Right.
Yeah, it's fine for me.
Well, the next 2 weeks I'll be at UB, so we can direct all of our frustration at them. If that's not, I don't know what my problem is here. I've tried switching internet a lot, and I think it's either the connection at the house here or it's the modem. I don't know. I haven't troubleshot yet. Does anybody know why I'm not drawing multiple rectangles?
Because the draw function keeps calling, and so every time it calls, it refreshes everything on the page and draws it in the new spot where X and Y, where mouse X and mouse Y are.
Yeah, what all are we drawing to the canvas? Like if the square is drawing right here, it should be there, right? On the canvas, which it is. But then I move this over. Well, why did it disappear from being over here? Why isn't it making like continually leaving where it's drawing every time?
Isn't it because it's instantaneous? Like there's no lag between drawing it and then deleting it and redrawing it? Because I know if I drag my mouse fast enough, I can see the multiple shapes track across the screen.
Yeah, it's a good thought. Not exactly though. It's a very cut and dry thing, but I'm surprised that so nobody in here is taking like DMS110 or any computer science classes or anything. This might be the first semester ever then that I've had a class where nobody has programmed before. Oh yeah, if you're in 110, then you should know why. Now you're in the hot seat. Any thoughts?
I just went to the bathroom a minute ago. I completely missed what we were talking about.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Trying to ask everyone why is this only drawing one instance of, like, why am I only seeing one rectangle? Why am I not seeing where it's been drawn consecutively?
Because every time it loops through, it draws the background again.
Boom, background. If we comment the background out, we see it everywhere, wherever we're drawing it. Also, we could just cut this background if we still actually want it. We could put it inside of setup. By inside of setup, I mean between the curly brackets, right? So another thing here that we can play around with is alpha channels. So if we search alpha, do we get it? I don't know if it clearly defines it here. It's in essence a oh, right here, color. See, there's a fourth value. So in essence, if you add a fourth value to a color, so say my rectangle, I want the fill, or actually, how about the stroke? I want the stroke to be 15. Right? So what else here? What else? Oh, the one thing I didn't cover, this is a small attribute, but it's worth noting. You notice how like my shape here is being drawn, but my cursor is like the top left of it, right? So we actually can change that. And this is kind of different based on the shape, I think. It's just the mode of it. So there's actually a thing called rect mode. and we can call it either center or corners. And this is something you could also just look in the reference for, right? Rect mode. If we draw that, then it's drawing at the middle of my cursor, right? Well, like, what if we don't even want a cursor? Maybe we could say like, no cursor. Play that. And it's just shapes, right? I'm gonna comment that out for now, but what's the other thing here? I want us to think about using that mouse X, mouse Y in a different way. So right now, we've used them to redraw the shape wherever we're pointing our mouse, right? And we've kind of talked a little bit more in depth now already that this is a variable. It's already known by the system, but literally if we type mouse capital X, the program knows that it's gonna, in that spot, put whatever value that mouse X currently is, right? It's this variable, that's what a variable does. So if it's already doing that, we could really just put that anywhere where we can put a value, where we could put a number. So instead of it just being right there, what about the value of my stroke weight? You know? Or what's another one? How about the location of my ellipse? We'll do this by mouse Y. So hopefully you guys are kind of playing around a little bit here. Anybody have questions relating to things that we're doing here? There is a couple other things, I think. Oh, I think the only other thing that I wanted to mention is that not only can we be throwing in variables, which we'll do more next class, these are already predefined, right? We've been talking about this. And we could set values, numerical values, you know, for each of these different categories. Or I don't know, values. Each parameter, I guess, is that a better word to use? So we could actually, instead of just having it be either one, we could actually do some math even. So we could do things like adding 50. We could multiply something by something. You know, we could do things like the stroke weight could be mouse Y times mouse X. And then maybe both of those can be in parentheses, and then we divide the whole thing by 14. It's a little big. Got to do some higher division here. By 26. Still a little big. 265. So I would like you guys to keep playing with these values and trying things, and for sure putting in notes. You know, like you might be like, yeah, I kind of get it now, but if it's kind of iffy in your mind, still put a note in. This stuff will save, right? And then when you come back in here and you want to open that back up, you go to editor, but like it's going to default to something new. So in that regard, you would just open and you would pick the sketch that you want and you have it back again, right? So the cool thing is as we go along with this, you know, you could actually end up sharing the full screen link. And just with this simple link right here, you can have this shareable to anybody that you want to share the link with. So like if I went to Facebook and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to share this because I think it's so freaking cool. It doesn't get a preview. Interesting. How about we do Facebook debugger for all you social media nerds out there. Scrape again. The image property should be explicitly provided. Interesting. Wonder if that's something you can embed somehow. So it looks like you could share it, but it's not going to be, you don't get a preview, I guess. That's interesting. Wonder if I could figure that out. So yeah, there's a bunch of things you guys will have for this weekend, but I think that if you're new to coding, this is just like a new language or learning a new instrument. You're going to forget it quick. And definitely make sure you've caught up with the first bit of reading and get in here and play around a little bit, you know. Try to make more shapes, try to draw something. Maybe you could use some lines, draw something out. A lot of intro courses, like they'll have a first assignment with this where I go this far, right? Like this hour of code, and then give you an assignment to like draw a 2D still life or something. I'm not going to because it's kind of a waste of time, but you should still have that notion of playing around so you're keeping fresh with like these little quirky things we're learning. Anybody have questions? I don't think I got a single person. Oh, I lied. Zhao had one question. Well, all right. Yeah, should be around for office hours. And See you next week.